Welcome to Big Dog Motorcycles. We are installing RIP Kit 507. This is just the half harness kit, so it's much easier to install than the full backbone harness. We'll be connecting this piece back to our original factory backbone harness, so we eliminate the big cluster box. I will show you how to remove all that stuff. We come in our kit, it will come with your MHC, EHC, also the momentary switch, bag of bolts, and on this particular model we're also going to add in a circuit breaker instead of the fusible link, changing it up just a little bit, not too much deal. But if you have the fusible link, we want to replace it with our circuit breaker, which is a lot simpler, a lot safer, and a little better and easier to wiring. So with our wiring kit, you should come with the instructions again for the 507s, and then you should also have a wire diagram for our MHCs. As we talked about earlier, this has the fusible link that we're going to remove and replace with our circuit breaker. We went ahead for time's sake and took out the battery, and also have unscrewed 2 bolts on the bottom side of our computer mounting bracket. We took off the wiring harness connectors themselves. Some of them are flathead screwdrivers, some are Phillips head screwdriver, or others are going to be an Allen head bolt. So these guys will come right off here, off the computer, off of the base. We will not be using this one. We will not be using the one going down towards the chassis. This one will be deleted. The one we're wanting to keep is the one coming out of the backbone harness, and it will be just a half harness. This is what we're going to install and plug in. So once the 2 bolts are removed off of the computer, we remove the computer and throw it away. And then we go back in here. This is our ignition module. We are going to leave our ignition module alone. Once again, leave the ignition module alone and mounted. We do have the wires going to the coil, coming through the backbone once again. We do not want to remove this wire harness either. So we'll start with removing our zip ties, going down through our harness here, pulling off our neutral safety switch, or our neutral indicator. We'll remove our speed sensor plug. Then we'll drop down back underneath here. We'll come back up, remove our oil pressure sensing unit, and then we'll also come down into the bottom of the wiring harness loop here. We'll have to cut all the zip ties off of that and unplug our brake light switch, which is not the first 2 here. This one is our crank position sensor pickup. We want to leave that one alone, as well as our rectifier wire. But our brake switch is one that we're needing to get into and remove. It will unplug somewhere in this wiring harness. May have to go back a little bit farther and remove this little bracket. One thing you need to be careful of is when you go to reinstall the oil pressure sensor wire, that you don't over tighten this nut. You will break the housing and have to replace the whole entire thing, which is, depending on the city you live in, could be 2 or 3 days of wait time just to replace a simple little fix. These take 5 to 10 pounds of foot-pounds of torque, nothing more than that. If they break, you're not going to die, but you're always going to have a red light on. There is a lock washer on these, so be careful not to lose that lock washer. For ease of removal, that little black cover does not like going in between all the rails and through the oil lines and up through the starter, so we just take it off. Do not need the horn wires, so we just go ahead and unplug the horn. We do need to unplug our rear tail lights and our tag light again. There we go. Careful how you cut the wires off, or the zip ties off. Do not want to cut any of the ignition wires. And just like that, we are halfway done. Now on this side, we're going to go ahead and first remove our fusible link and install our circuit breaker. We want to make sure that we don't hurt this fitting, this mount. We want to remove the rectifier wire. But the fusible link is the jumper wire that leads back to the battery and charges the battery. Without a jumper wire between the battery and the circuit breakers, we will not get any power. This is where people mess up. They take this out, so when you replace that, you need to replace it with a jumper wire that will go from our circuit breaker to our battery like we do on our canines. If you have the factory battery tray, which you should, some of them have different trays depending on the years that were built, but a lot of them will have the same tray for this particular model. But the two screws that are included with the circuit breaker should mount right up where the original fusible link mounted. We're going to install them there, but you want to make sure you can get to the reset switch, which is on the side of the circuit breaker. Whichever way you put it, it's up to you. Probably if you put it on the outside, it would be easier to get to. Just pull off your battery tray cover and push the button. But we also want to make sure that we get our wires hooked up the correct way. Only one side will get our voltage from the regulator, and that will be our brass side. All other power wires will be mounted to the standard terminal, and we also want to make sure we add our jumper wire from the other side of the circuit breaker over to our positive side of our battery. We'll build one in a little bit for that. Now that we have the circuit breaker installed, we can install our PCM bracket. We want this one to face backwards towards the battery or the rear fender, not the front. You put it in the front, your plug goes in wrong. So let's place it in this way. We have quite a bit of extra harness here, so how do we want to run this? It's up to you, but we will have to hide all of this harness because it will not fit all in a ball right here. What we may do on this particular one, because we do have a lot of room underneath, let's try and push a few things out the side and out the bottom. Our ground wire needs to go in here on this side of things. Be easy fit on our battery there. We do know the this one's a ignition mod, needs to go this route up to here. Should have a 3-pin on the back side. Here it is.
That's the ignition module?
Yes. Ignition module, there we go. You'll notice the colors do not match, but it is okay. It's what we need to do. We have red, yellow, and black is just fine with our red, green, and black. That is our ignition module is hooked up. Now, we do have our rear, that's our momentary switch. We'll put that in just a little bit. This should be turn signals, rear turn signals. So we're going to do that one later. Of course it's here, so let's get it out of the way. We have that is our rear turn signal switch. Most of the colors match on that one, so that's not something that we normally have issues with. Our horn wires can run up front, up to the horn. Doesn't matter what side of the horn plug they go on. a negative or a positive, it doesn't really matter, as long as they both plug in and click. Let's see what else we got here. This one is going to be, I believe it's the tag light, sure is. We're going to rerun this one here in a little bit, but for now, to keep everything flowing proper, get it plugged in. The rest of them we should be able to run down and through. That should be our neutral switch, our starting, and this one is going to run back over to our circuit breakers, which we have up top here, because this is what powers our PCM up with. It's going to go on our standard colored post. And then back down here, we should have our starting wire, our neutral switch, and they're all going to run down through here, up through our starter, and back over here to our neutral switch for the neutral light. And for our starting wire, we're going to, since we have a bit extra, we're going to run it down and back up through our starting wire there. And on the back side of the starter is where we need to plug it in. Of course, I'm on the wrong side to see how I'm doing it, but it goes there. All right, I'll switch. Okay, our starter wire, push down, up, and in. Right inside there. Got that one. Then we have our speed sensor switch is sitting right there as well. Gonna grab it, plug her in. The colors do match on this particular one. Black, green, and red. Black, green, and red. See about if this will work that way. Yep, it will. So we're going to put in the neutral light. It's going to go under the starter wire. Gently feed it through there. We don't want any broken terminals or cables or wires. And plugged in. What else do we have down here? Should have. I don't know. Okay. Signal wire for my got that one in, that one's in, that one's in. Okay, push these back a little bit, and then we're going to do our oil line, oil pressure sensor, and our brake light switch. These are a little tricky just because there's already other wires in there. Doesn't matter how many you have in there, this rubber cover is always a pain in the butt. As long as you get it under the wire, you can run the rest of the way through carefully. You'll run that one between the starter and the transmission. It's a very tight squeeze. Down the frame rail, up through the oil lines. We can sneak the brake line and plug, as well as the oil line plug through. We want to run the oil line plug to the back side of the oil lines. And then we should have a brake sensor switch up top here. Pull it down a little bit and plug it in. Again, the oil line plug should not be over torqued. 5 pounds at the most. Try not to go past 10. It's not very much, but not very much can break these off. They're very brittle and can take a little bit to get. Lock washer and nut. And now you're ready to nip and tuck. Alright, just like that, we made a little jumper wire. Doesn't have to be very long. Just has to go from our terminal to our battery to connect the loop to create the circuit that we're looking for. And now everything should fire right up. Not tightening anything down due to the fact we are still going to adjust the wires and try and get things in a little better order, a little more organized than chaos, but we need to make sure everything works before we get everything tightened up, cinched down, and too short to do anything with. Yes. We know we have our neutral light hooked up. We know we have our oil light hooked up. It's not tight. It's okay. We got our brake light hooked up. We have our speed sensor hooked up. We have our timing with our ignition box hooked up on both sides. The crank position sensor connected correctly. We have our starter wire connected. And I think we got the wires running back over here to our circuit breaker. A horn is hooked up. Tag light is hooked up. Brake lights are hooked up. Momentary. That's what we're missing real quick. And locked in. Now that we got our rig kit installed, now it's time to check out our power source and make sure everything is functioning correctly. Turn the key on, check your dash, make sure our neutral light is on, make sure our oil light is on. We are good to go there. Check our high beam, our low beam, it's working. Give it a horn quick bump. It works. Left turn signal, right turn signal. Now let's do our hazards. They're flashing. Next thing, check on an off switch of your ignition module. Make sure we got a little red light lighting up. Turn it off. Give it a quick bump. And we are set if we do have problems with our key switch not working, the first thing we really need to check out is the little black connectors. So we remove the black cover, 3 screws, and we look at our wires. We want to make sure that none of our wires are pulled out. We give it a good quick twist, left, right, kind of roll it a little bit, and seeing if any of the connectors pop out, push out, any of the pins come loose. And sometimes we'll look inside the connectors and see if the pins have pushed down. If the pins are down and not evenly flush, they're not making a good connection. So you need to go back in the back side of the connector and push the pin and wire back into the connector. So last time we went to start the bike and we had no power from the key switch. So we went ahead and checked out what was wrong. First was our key switch was bad. It was not making good contact, so I replaced the key switch, and once I replaced the key switch, the headlights, turn signals, nothing worked on top. So I went ahead and also replaced our PCB boards. So those are 2 things that can happen on dead bikes that have been sitting for years. This has been ran in over 4.5 years. That's why it's still dirty and not cleaned up, but this is what they look like when I get them. To make them run again, I have to do wiring harnesses, so the rip kits. A lot of times I do new key installs, and I also do PCB boards. Those go out quite a bit. Those are the 3 major things go wrong with these bikes with electricity. We also have, we do not have the key switch available, but we do have a push button on and alarm system to go in these as well. See the video attached or link attached for the installation of the key switch and alarm system.